At any rate, I was born in a Christian family. My mother was an Anglican, my father a Presbyterian, and my father's father was one of the leading church scholars there in Jamaica. He had learned Greek and Hebrew and was quite a figure. I didn't spend much time in Jamaica. My parents migrated to Canada when I was quite young. So I really don't have too many recollections of religion beyond, as a child, not wanting to put the penny in the plate. You know, we all were given coins to take to church, and when the plate was passed around, you had to put the penny or whatever in the plate. And I remember doing so because, of course, parents were there and you couldn't put it in your pocket, but doing so quite reluctantly and wondering to myself, why are we doing this? I would much prefer to use it to buy some candy or something else. At any rate, my parents migrated to Canada. At any rate, with regards to Christianity, during my primary and secondary levels of education, Christianity was Sunday school. Sunday school was where you met girls and arranged parties. So, in terms of religious instruction, I guess it was going on, but most of us as children or young people were oblivious to it. In terms of Islam, what I saw of Islam during that period, what I can remember, there was one song called Ahab the Arab. Later on I came to find there's no Arabic name called Ahab. There's no Arabs by the name of Ahab, but this was the name of the song, Ahab the Arab, Sheik of the Burning Sands. You know, this is what I remember. Cartoons, the image of that Arab riding on the camel with a sword in one hand and the Qur'an in the other. You know, you either accept this Qur'an or you lose your head. My family, after I completed high school, migrated to Malaysia. My parents were there with the Colombo Plan. Both of my parents were teachers, and they were there helping the Malaysian government in their educational program. There, my friends were mainly expats, and I can honestly say that there was no visible signs of Islam in the society. This was basically the focus of my life until I finished off high school and decided to go back to Canada to further my education on a tertiary level, which is in university. I was accepted in the University of Simon Fraser, and there I went to do a degree in biochemistry. Simon Fraser University at the time was one of the more experimental universities in the sense that they were introducing the credit hour system, which was not followed by the other universities across the country. They were following the British system of a single course throughout the year. And at the same time, what you found there was really a great looseness in the whole structure of the university. And there were a number of American students in this university who had come up to the university, and their ideas were influencing the students. During this period, I was directly involved, and I began a conversion to what may be called revolutionary politics. I scrapped Christianity because it was really something which wasn't implemented in my life, so to speak. I mean, if somebody asked me, were you a Christian, I guess up to that point I would have said, yes, I was a Christian. But what it meant to be a Christian, that was left to the individual's interpretation. And I guess that's basically the way it is for most people today who are Christians. During this period, I began to do a lot of reading in Marxist-Leninist literature, and I was exposed briefly to something of Islam through the autobiography of Malcolm X. However, it was read, his autobiography was read as a part of required reading. You know, for you to be a solid revolutionary in those days, you had to read certain books. You know, you just had to get through these books to be able to say, I read these books. So I read it amongst the books. I mean, there was some interesting information probably regarding his early life in terms of the type of racial injustices which existed in America, which awoken me more, along with other books of this type, to the oppression which existed in Western society, and made me more open to embrace the communist ideal of a just society. Communist banners of equality, justice, and fair distribution of wealth, etc., was very attractive at that time. So I converted to communism. I dropped out of school, finished off basically what was called an associate degree, 2 years in biochemistry, and from there I left Canada and went down to the States, because this was where revolutionary activities were taking place. I joined a group there in Los Angeles and San Francisco known as the Soledad Defense Committee, which was basically involved in gathering funds for a court case which was going on at the time for both the Soledad brothers as well as Angela Davis, because she was imprisoned at the time. What I noted, I had gone down there with a lot of ideals about communism and its implementation. What I noted was that there were a number of discrepancies in terms of the morality of the people involved. After one rally where we had marched with placards and everything through the city, and there was a set of donations collected and taken back to the headquarters, I wanted to buy a pack of cigarettes. I didn't have any more money, and I said to the person who was there in the office, you know, if they could lend me some money to buy a pack of cigarettes. They said, oh, it's okay. They pulled open the drawer, and out of the donation box they gave me some money to buy cigarettes. I took it and went and bought the cigarettes, but something struck me. How could this be that we were gathering this money to help these people's legal cause, and then they so easily would take from this money to give me to buy cigarettes? And they told me it's okay, you know, we all get our basic things out of it. And I came to find out that in fact everybody's rent was being paid out of these funds. You know, people were buying cars for transportation. Parties were organized with these funds. You know, drugs and alcohol was bought with these funds. So, you know, it really bothered me. I continued with them, but this thing really struck at me and just left me really disheartened. After the rally in the park in Los Angeles, I decided to go back to Toronto and, you know, get involved there instead, you know, with the people who maybe I was more familiar with. I went back and joined an organization there called Black Youth Organization, which worked with the Black Students Union and University of Toronto campus. And, you know, being involved, again, this was still an extension of communist politics with some element of nationalistic teachings, which is that we would focus on black Canadians and try to elevate their consciousness towards the oppression which existed. But again, I found myself in a situation where it was mainly students and young people talking to young people. You know, we weren't really affecting anything in the society. And I could say probably my biggest exposure here was to further reading to books of famous writers of the past. Probably the most striking thought that I can remember from that era was that of a writer, Frederick Douglass, who back in the 1800s, he was a black man who had been freed and was quite outspoken for the cause of black people in America. He had made a statement that the limits of oppressors are defined by those who they oppress, where he put the responsibility on the oppressed, that they are the ones ultimately that define how much they will be oppressed. That left a sort of an impression on myself, in that it sort of indicated that the state of a people is determined by their own consciousness. If they don't want to be free, if they don't want to be liberated, they don't want to be educated, then they won't be. You know, you really can't make people free. People have to want to be free. During this period, I had some exposure to Islam. We had a standard movie that everybody had to watch, known as the Battle of Algiers, which documented the Algerian struggle for independence. And of course, the battle cry during that struggle was Allahu Akbar. You know, there were women wearing hijab and hiding weapons under their outer garments, and so there was something of Islam there. Then I also came in contact with the black Muslims, Elijah Muhammad's followers. I went to the States again and visited some of their temples, but though I was impressed by the discipline that they had, in terms of the personal discipline, outwardly anyway, this idea that God was a black man, just I'd given up the idea of God anyway, becoming a communist, but then the idea that God was a black man who should be worshipped became even more ludicrous to me. What I found was that when I got back to Toronto, that a good friend of mine who was in the leadership committee of this organization, which I belonged to, had accepted Islam. She became the wife of a known speaker today, Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, who is involved in lecturing in different parts of the world. I think he has come to Australia before. In any case, his wife, who was a good friend of mine, had accepted Islam. And this caused me to say, well, let me have a look. Because she was perhaps an even more fervent communist than I was. She was a Maoist, which is like the extreme wing at that time. She had virtually memorized Mao Zedong's Red Book. Would be able to make quotes anytime quotes were needed from Mao. So for her to convert, it struck me as something, there's got to be something behind this. So I asked her for some books and I began to read. The first book I read was called Islam, the Misunderstood Religion. And this was written by Muhammad Qutb. And this book basically was a comparison between Islam and all of the other systems that were out there, Christianity, communism, capitalism, socialism, from a social point of view, a political point of view, economics, from all of the various aspects. And after reading that book, actually, I was convinced that Islam really had the best program for human society, for establishing justice, etc. in human society. I continued to read towards understanding Islam by Maududi and other books, and I became more and more convinced of that reality, that Islam really did have the best program. But the concept of God was something which just didn't reappear, merely because you would like to believe, you just start to believe. Having denied God for some years before, it would take some time before belief in God was something which became a part of my life again. And actually the turning point for myself, having reflected and discussed, etc., about God and belief in God, it came for me at a time when in the commune in which I lived, I had my own room, and I had a lot of books. And sometimes people would come in and borrow the books and read them in my room. I didn't allow people to take them out of the room. They would come in and read them, sit at my desk and read. And on one occasion, I was lying on my bed, and some people had come in, were sitting at the desk reading. And I'd gone into a state which was sort of between waking and sleep. I was aware of the people in the room, but yet I was dreaming. And I saw myself going into this warehouse with a bicycle of mine. I was walking it into this warehouse. And the further I went into the warehouse, the darker it got. And I started to get this feeling of fear because of the fact that, I guess maybe I had a fear of darkness, but the further I went in, the more this feeling started to overcome me that perhaps I may not be able to get out of this place. I would continue to turn back to make sure that the entrance through which I came was still there. And each time I turned, I could still see it, though getting smaller and smaller. Eventually, I turned around and there was no entrance. I was in total blackness. And I got this fear, which basically was saying to me, if you don't get out of this, you will never get out. It was, I guess, a fear of death or whatever, but I was just overwhelmed by it. And I wanted to get out, so I started to scream. I was aware of the people in the room. I started to scream out to them, help me, but words wouldn't come out. They were stuck in my throat. So they couldn't hear me. I wasn't able to get out of the situation. I kept screaming until I reached the point I realized there was no way out. I was lost, totally. And at the point when I realized this and I gave up, I woke up. And I sat and thought about this. That to me, it was like confirmation that there was a force beyond me. Confirmation of the existence of God, in that I wasn't able to get myself out of that situation. The people in the room were not able to help me. That were it not for that which was beyond me getting me out of that situation, I couldn't have. So that had a marked effect on me. Shortly after that, I decided to accept Islam. And when I was taught how to pray, the sujood in particular, I realized that my adopted brother was a Muslim. At that point, I was happy on one hand, but I was shocked on the other hand. That he had understood all of this and had all of this all these years and had never said anything. I went out to Ottawa because my parents were there and he was there studying with my parents in university. He was very happy to see me. I was happy but upset. I was upset with him because I told, why? All these years you're with us, you never said anything. He said that, he felt embarrassed because for him to say anything to us that might influence us to become Muslims, he felt it would be a disservice to my parents who had helped him, and he just felt shy about causing any problems in the family. But I told him, of course, that he has an obligation to God, and that obligation is above all else. If he had that knowledge, he should have shared it with us, given us the ability or the right to make the choice for ourselves. At any rate, after that, I returned to Toronto and began to study Arabic and Islam. I continued to play music for a little bit. Nobody told me it was haram or forbidden, but I just, at that point, I found myself there in nightclubs playing with the other members of the group. Everybody else in the group is high on drugs, and I'm playing into a club where everybody there is drunk, and it's like I was in another world. I was amongst them, but I was not a part of it, and the corruption that was there was so obvious to me. I felt myself out of place. I shouldn't be here. So, it wasn't too long after that that I decided to just pack it in. I sold all my musical equipment, records, everything, and just, got out of it and started to focus on studying Islam. At this point, I traveled to England. I joined the Jamaat Tabligh because they were the most active Islamic group at the time. There was a particular individual known as Colonel Saab, or Colonel Amiruddin from India, who was very, very vibrant personality, And he took a group of us to England for the first major ijtima there called the Sheffield Ijtima. And I spent about 3 months in England with the Jamaat Tabligh. I was going there for 7 days. This was initially what my commitment was, 7 days. But, they have a way that they make you make sacrifices that you don't necessarily want to make at the time. So I ended up being there for almost 3 months. And I was married. Actually, I was married about 3 weeks before I went off on this 7-day trip. And, they would, in the gatherings, they would, point me out and say, look at this brother. Look at the sacrifice that he made. He just got married. He's out with us, and he's spending this time, and he's going to spend even more time. And, of course, after saying that, I was obliged to spend, another couple of weeks, till eventually it became 3 months. My wife was writing me frantic letters, if you don't come back. Finally, I managed to extricate myself and get back before my marriage was destroyed. At any rate, that was a learning experience for me. I had gone there with the intention of increasing my knowledge about Islam. Alhamdulillah, Colonel Amiruddin taught me tajweed, the proper recitation of the Qur'an. And I had been told there that in England, in the many mosques that they had in England, there were scholars in each mosque there who you could learn with. So wherever I went, whenever we stopped at any of the mosques, I would sit under the scholar there and take my notes, asking questions, etc. And I came back, and when I came back to Canada, I announced to my wife that we are now Hanafis. And she said, what is a Hanafi? Well, I explained to her that, we are Hanafis, because the Jamaat was teaching that, of course, you had to follow a madhab. You had to follow one of these schools of Islamic law. And though they were all the same, somebody will come along and tell you, well, the greatest Imam was Imam Abu Hanifa. He was the first. Most Muslims are Hanafis. So then we're all Hanafis. So that's the best thing to be. Differences which led me to believe that I needed to go and learn Arabic thoroughly and study Islamic law from the sources myself. So I applied to go and study in Saudi Arabia to University of Medina, and I was accepted there and began to study. I completed a BA in Usul al-Din, or Islamic Studies, and following that I went to Riyadh and did a master's in Islamic theology. When I went to Riyadh, my parents actually were there before me. They were there teaching, because after having left Malaysia, they came back after I left, came back to Canada. From there they went to Nigeria, to northern Nigeria, where they taught for some years. They went to Yemen after that, and then they came out to Riyadh and had began teaching there at a school called the Minaret Schools. And I was invited whilst doing my master's to start teaching their Islamic Studies. So I took on this responsibility of teaching students mainly who were expatriates, because it's an English medium, expatriates working there. Their parents had studied in America or England, and who wanted their children to continue in English medium. During this period, I also began to, once I finished my master's at Imam Ibn Saud University, or King Saud University, I began to a PhD in University of Wales. And the focus of my PhD was that of exorcism in Islam, a lot of people were asking me, why exorcism? You know, couldn't you find anything else to write about? You know what, for me, I began this study of exorcism, which involved, you know, traveling to different parts of the Muslim world and investigating, because it was something which was out there, which, though I had studied all the way up to a master's level, I really didn't get a clear picture as to what was involved, you know, what is the rights and the wrong with regards to exorcism. So I decided to make that my focus for the PhD. And at the same time, I felt I wanted to utilize it as a means to provide in the Orientalist circles material which was authentic on the spirit world of Islam. You know, the human spirit, the world of the jinn, the world of the angels, because this would become a major part of the thesis. Because anybody researching today the spirit world in Islam, what they find is the writings of Orientalists in which they have gathered the folk tales and myths of Muslim peoples from all around the world, and they've presented this as being the Islamic view of the spirit world. But in fact, it's a lot of confusion, and anybody studying it would think that, come out thinking that Islam has got a very confused concept of the spirit world. So I felt that this thesis would also provide this foundation. Now, whilst doing the PhD, the Gulf War came up. And prior to the Gulf War, I was invited out to the base in Dhahran. So it was the Saudi Arabian Cultural Information Tent. There we provided information about Saudi Arabian culture, which of course, much of which is from Islam. So it meant explaining things about Islam. And we took the troops into the city. We helped them purchase things. We showed them different aspects of Islamic society. We took them into mosques, etc. And in the course of 6 months, before they were all processed out of the country, alhamdulillah, more than 3,000 of them had accepted Islam. And following that, I joined the Saudi Arabian Air Force headquarters in Riyadh in the Islamic Affairs Department, and continued to do work amongst the Americans, military people who were in the country. And I went to the United States with the American military and helped them set up an organization known as the Muslim Members of the Military, which established places of worship and little libraries in all of the major bases, American bases across the world. And the whole momentum for Islam within the military picked up to such a point that within 2 years after that, the first Muslim chaplain was designated for the military, the army, and then a Muslim chaplain from the Navy, and now they're looking for one from the Air Force. And Islam has continued to grow in leaps and bounds within the military. Following that, I continued with them for 2 years, and then I transferred to the UAE, United Arab Emirates, where I joined up with a charitable organization there by the name of Darul Bir, and set up for them a da'wah center in Dubai, where I have with me 4 other brothers and sisters who are involved in da'wah. And alhamdulillah, it has been quite successful. We have an average of about a person daily accepting Islam, most of which are from the Philippines, but we have a large number also from India, from Hindu and Christian backgrounds, as well as Americans, because American ships, Navy ships come through there. And we have a network of people who are helping us. We work with the taxi drivers. Many of the taxi drivers are from Pakistan, Pathans. And when they drive anybody who questions or asks them anything about Islam or anything to relate to Islam, they immediately bring them to our center so we can provide information for them. A number of them also carry pamphlets inside of their taxis. I've also been involved in giving lectures about Islam on television, on Sharjah television, as well as Ajman television, 2 television stations there in the UAE. And I set up a department of foreign literature in Sharjah for the publication of Islamic materials, which on one hand supports the Dawah Center, pamphlets for distribution, as well as continuing the publication process which I began in Saudi Arabia of trying to produce good material in English which conveys the body of Islamic knowledge which is available in Arabic. And at the same time, I also began to teach at the American University in Dubai, which is an American university, very Western. Students there are very Westernized. And I'm teaching a course called Introduction to Islam. It is, again, an issue of da'wah, or explaining Islam to students. Many in my class may be Muslims, but the vast majority of them don't pray or fast, these type of things. So for them, many of them have taken this course as like an elective, thinking that it would be an easy few credits, only to find me there, you know, shaking them up, you know. And alhamdulillah, it's been a good experience. A number of them, after, you know, the term's been over, have come and told me, well, you know, we started praying now, you know, we appreciate what you had said to us. And so this is basically the activity that I'm involved with at present. You know, not, of course, to mention lecturing in different parts of the world, here as well as Philippines, Malaysia, England, etc. So from that path which I've outlined to you, which is not only my way to Islam in the sense of my conversion, but my way to understanding Islam. Because coming to Islam didn't end with conversion, but has been a continual process after accepting Islam, a continual process of education, continually increasing my knowledge and also sharing that knowledge with others. This process, or this path, we can see began in a state of ignorance, where the only images of Islam were very distorted images. There were contacts during that path with Muslims, but those Muslims had no effect on my life because either one, they were not practicing Islam as it should be practiced, or because they didn't feel a responsibility to carry the message of Islam to the non-Muslims around them. As such, it would be my advice then to those of you who are Muslims in the audience to know that it is a responsibility on yourselves to live Islam, whether you may have enough knowledge to propagate it and explain it to others. At least by living Islam, by being examples of Islam, you may give others who are non-Muslims an opportunity of being exposed to Islam, whether it's in a work situation, whether it's at school, with your neighbors or whatever. This is a continual responsibility that you should feel ashamed if you are not involved in. You should feel sinful because in fact you are in sin if you do not share this information. Because to have knowledge of God's revelation and to not share it with others around you to the degree or to the level of your own ability, this in fact is a crime. This is a sin. And for those of us who have sufficient knowledge to convey it and to propagate it, it is very important for us to be actively involved in this matter, to work together where others may help us, because it's always difficult when one is on one's own, when one is by oneself, to have the courage to share. But when we are with others, when there are others who are supporting us, encouraging us, then it becomes a lot easier. So I would hope that out of this you all would reflect on this responsibility. And for those of you who are non-Muslims in the audience, I hope you are not offended by anything I said. If you are Christians, you know, I mean, as I'm just telling it like it was for me. I'm not saying that every Christian experienced what I experienced, but I know, even till today, Christianity for most people tends to be very nominal. We are Christians because our parents were Christians, but what it means to be a Christian, few people really know. And as such, I would invite you to look at the teachings of Islam and see what it has to offer, because Islam in no uncertain terms represents the way of life which Prophet Jesus himself brought, but which became distorted and diluted to the point where it has very little effect on the lives of Christians today. And with that, inshallah, I will conclude my speech, hoping that, as I said, I didn't offend anybody in sharing with you my own experiences, and hoping that it has been of some guidance or enlightenment.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. All praise is due to Allah, and may Allah's peace and blessings be on the last messenger of Allah. I'd like to welcome you to the IOU experience, brothers and sisters in Islam. This is an opportunity for you to fulfill the prophetic command: seeking knowledge is compulsory for every Muslim. Talabul ilmi farida ala kulli Muslim. The Islamic Online University is an opportunity for you to access Islamic knowledge at your own convenience. It is tuition free for the BA level and absolutely free for the diploma level. For the diploma, we have over 28 courses that you can study from without any prerequisites. You don't need a high school diploma, or you don't have to be a certain age. It is for any and everybody. It is an introduction to Islamic knowledge and Islamic learning. The BA, on the other hand, is an undergraduate course in Islamic Studies, taken from the curriculums of the Islamic University in Medina, Azhar University in Egypt, and Durman Islamic University in the Sudan. The best of what is in those curriculums is combined in the Islamic Online University's curriculum. It is offered in English medium, one of the few courses available online where a BA can be studied in English. Arabic is a subject which everyone has to study, and you will get a working knowledge of Arabic to be able to read and understand Arabic, to hear and understand Arabic, and to speak to some degree. But the course fundamentally covers the content of the traditional Usul al-Din and Sharia programs, with an additional benefit of courses in other supportive areas like Islamic psychology, teaching methodology, Islamic economics, Islamic banking and finance, Islamic management, and so on and so forth. A variety of other courses that helps to round out the student, giving him or her the ability to benefit the community on a much higher level. We have, along with our standard 48 course curriculum for the BA, we have along with it minors, where you take another semester of study, 5 or 6 courses in an area of your choice that you can specialize in. We call it a minor. So you graduate with a BA in Islamic Studies with a minor in education.